The void of space stretched endlessly before the Dominion, its gleaming hull cutting through the darkness like a blade. Inside the massive warship, Commander Wren stood tall on the command bridge, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed at the view screen. His pale blue skin reflected the soft glow of the ship's controls, and his four-fingered hand tapped lightly against his arm. For 200 years, the Valari had conquered every world they set their sights on. No species had ever presented a real challenge. "Commander," said Officer Mack, looking up from his station, "we are approaching the blue planet. Initial scans show primitive technology, no space travel capabilities. The inhabitants call it Earth." Wren nodded, not bothering to hide his boredom. Another simple scouting mission. The High Council insisted on checking every potentially habitable world, no matter how backward. "Life signs?" Wren asked. "Billions of them, mostly concentrated in urban areas. Their technology appears to be limited to basic digital systems and combustion engines." Wren laughed. The Valari had moved beyond such primitive tools ages ago. Their bodies were enhanced with nanomachines that healed wounds in seconds. Their ships could travel faster than light. Their weapons could turn mountains to dust. "Prepare a full scan. We'll send a report to the High Council and move on. This world isn't worth our time." The crew followed his orders without question. The Dominion moved into orbit around the blue planet, its sensors reaching out to gather information. Wren turned away, planning to retire to his quarters. He had seen enough backward worlds to last several lifetimes. Then the first alarm sounded. "Commander," Officer Talia shouted from her station, "something's wrong with the main drive system." Wren spun around, his boredom instantly replaced by concern. "Explain." "I don't know. The core is experiencing some kind of reaction with this planet's magnetic field. It's like nothing we've seen before." More alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed across the bridge. Wren rushed to the main control panel, his fingers flying over the display. "Shut down the drive. Switch to backup systems." "Backup systems are not responding," said Mac, his voice tight with fear. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing several crew members to the floor. Wren grabbed the edge of the console to stay upright. "We're being pulled into the planet's gravity well," Talia reported. Her usual confidence was gone. "Main engines are completely offline." "Emergency thrusters," Wren ordered. No response. The view screen showed the blue planet growing larger by the second. This was impossible. Valari technology did not simply fail. They were the masters of the galaxy, the most advanced beings in known space. "Prepare escape pods," Wren commanded. "All non-essential personnel evacuate immediately." The crew rushed to obey. Wren stayed at his post, desperately trying to restart the ship's systems. Nothing worked. For the first time in his long life, he felt true fear. "Commander, you must evacuate as well," Talia said, pausing at the bridge door. "I will attempt a controlled crash landing," Wren replied. "Go." "That's an order." After she left, Wren strapped himself into the commander's chair. The ship was entering the atmosphere now, its hull heating up. Warning signals screamed from every console. Through the view screen, he could see clouds rushing past, then patches of green and blue. Land and water. The ship's remaining systems strained to slow their descent, but Wren knew it wouldn't be enough. The Dominion, pride of the Valari fleet, was going to crash on this backward planet. As the ground rushed up to meet them, Wren had a final, humbling thought. Perhaps they weren't as untouchable as they believed. The impact came with a roar of tearing metal and a darkness that swallowed everything. Pain was the first thing Wren felt. Sharp, intense pain that pulsed through his entire body. His eyes fluttered open to darkness broken only by sparks from damaged systems. The bridge of the Dominion lay in ruins around him. The smell of burning metal filled his nostrils. He tried to move and felt a stabbing sensation in his side. Looking down, he saw a piece of metal embedded in his blue flesh. Under normal circumstances, his body's nanomachines would have healed such a wound in moments, But something was wrong. The healing was happening, but very slowly. Ren pulled himself from the commander's chair, wincing as he yanked the metal shard from his side. A small trickle of purple blood oozed from the wound. He pressed his hand against it and looked around at what remained of his ship. The view screen was shattered. Daylight streamed in through the cracks in the hull. Most of the bridge crew were dead, thrown from their stations during the crash. Those who had escaped in pods might have survived, but they were scattered across this unknown planet now. Ren limped to a still-functioning console and tried to activate the emergency beacon. Nothing happened. He tried the communication systems. Also dead. The Dominion, once the pride of the Valari fleet, was now just a giant metal coffin. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself. Valari technology simply did not fail like this. Yet here he was, stranded on a primitive world with no way to call for help. He gathered what supplies he could find: a portable scanner, an energy weapon, and a few ration packs. The scanner was working, but barely. It showed breathable air outside, but also warned of high gravity and unusual atmospheric composition. Ren found a gap in the hull wide enough to squeeze through. The bright light of Earth's sun made him shield his eyes as he emerged from the wreckage. He stood on grass for the first time, feeling the strange plant life beneath his boots. The ship had crashed in a forested area, carving a long gouge through the trees before coming to rest in a small clearing. His first step nearly brought him to his knees. The gravity was stronger than he expected, pulling at his limbs and making his chest feel heavy. His species was used to the artificial gravity of their ships and the lighter pull of their homeworld. This planet's force was crushing. Ren checked his scanner again. It showed several escape pods had landed within a 50-mile radius. The closest was about 10 miles east. He would need to find his crew and establish a base until rescue came. If rescue came, he pushed that thought away and began walking. Each step was difficult in the heavy gravity. The air felt thick in his lungs, rich with oxygen, but also filled with particles his body wasn't accustomed to. Sweat, something Valari rarely experienced, began to bead on his blue skin. After just an hour of walking, Ren was exhausted. His enhanced muscles ached, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. He had covered barely 2 miles. At this rate, it would take days to reach the nearest pod. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and the air grew heavy with moisture. Ren had never experienced a rainstorm outside of simulations. When the first drops fell, they stung his skin slightly, the water's composition different from anything on his homeworld. Within minutes, the rain became a downpour. Thunder boomed overhead, and flashes of lightning illuminated the darkening forest. Ren's scanner began to malfunction in the heavy moisture. He needed shelter. The storm was growing more intense, and night would fall soon. His vision, adapted for the controlled lighting of spaceships, struggled with the rapidly changing natural light. Through the curtain of rain, Ren spotted a structure in the distance, a simple building with light glowing from its windows, signs of the primitive natives of this world. Under normal circumstances, he would have avoided contact with such an underdeveloped species. But these were not normal circumstances. Shivering in the cold rain, his body failing to adapt to this harsh environment, Commander Ren of the mighty Valari fleet took his first humbling steps toward a human dwelling, seeking the help of creatures he had, just hours ago, considered beneath his notice. Ren stood at the edge of the clearing, rain pouring down his blue skin as he watched the wooden structure. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. Through a window, he could see movement inside. The shapes of the planet's natives. Thunder crashed overhead. His scanner was now completely dead, the rain having seeped into its circuits. He had no choice. With cautious steps, he approached the dwelling. The door was a simple wooden panel with a metal handle. Ren hesitated, then knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. He knocked again, harder this time. The door swung open. A male human stood there, his face instantly transforming from casual curiosity to shock and fear. The man stumbled backward, his mouth open in a wordless shout. "Jack, "Who is it?" A female voice called from inside. The man called Jack couldn't answer. He stared at Ren, his hand fumbling behind him for something. "A weapon," Ren assumed. "I need shelter," Ren said, though he knew they wouldn't understand his language. He kept his hands visible, trying to appear non-threatening despite his alien appearance. "Dad, what's going on?" A younger male appeared behind Jack. He stopped, his eyes widening at the sight of Ren. But instead of fear, his expression showed fascination. "Ben, get back." Jack finally found his voice. "Emma, call the police." Ren stayed where he was, the rain still pelting him. He was too exhausted to run, too weak to fight. He simply stood there, shivering in the cold. The young one, Ben, moved closer despite his father's warning. "Dad, wait. Look at him. He's hurt." Ren glanced down at his side. The wound was still bleeding, purple blood mixing with rainwater. That's blood," Jack said, his voice shaking. "Is it bleeding?" "He's injured," Ben said. "We can't just leave him out there." A woman appeared behind them. "Emma," Ren assumed. She gasped when she saw him, but quickly regained her composure. "Jack, he needs help. Look at him shivering." "But it's not human," Jack protested. "Neither is our dog, but we help her if she was hurt," Emma replied. She gently pushed past her husband and son. "Come in," she said to Ren, gesturing with her hand. Ren understood the gesture if not the words. He nodded and stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was warm, heated by a fire in a stone fireplace. Simple furniture filled the room. So primitive compared to Valari technology, yet somehow comforting in its solidity. "Ben, get some towels," Emma ordered. "Jack, stop standing there with your mouth open and close the door." Jack obeyed, shutting the door but keeping his distance from Ren. "We should call someone. The government or someone." "And tell them what?" "That we have an alien in our living room." "They'd think we're crazy," Emma said. She approached Ren cautiously. "Can you understand me?" Ren studied her face. These humans showed their emotions so openly, so honestly. Among the Valari, such displays would be considered weakness. Yet there was strength in her eyes as she faced him without weapons or technology to protect her. Ben returned with several cloths. Emma took one and slowly extended it toward Ren. "For the water," she said, mimicking wiping her arms. Ren took the cloth and copied her motion, drying his skin. The simple kindness of the gesture struck him deeply. "You're really an alien, aren't you?" Ben asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "From space." Ren couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the curiosity. He pointed upward. "Yes, from space." Ben's face lit up. "Dad, he understands." Jack still stood back, wary. "How do we know it's not dangerous?" "If he wanted to hurt us, he could have done it already," Emma pointed out. She gestured to Ren's wound. "He needs help." The family's dog emerged from another room, a medium-sized animal with brown fur. It approached Ren, sniffing cautiously. Ren had seen images of such creatures in the Dominion's database. He slowly extended his hand, palm down, toward the animal. The dog sniffed his hand, then licked it. Ben laughed. "See, Duke likes him. Duke's a good judge of character." Emma nodded. "Let's clean that wound. Then food. You must be hungry, right?" She pantomimed eating. Ren understood. He nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. These primitives, with their simple technology and fragile bodies, were showing him compassion. Something the mighty Valari, with all their power, rarely practiced. For the first time since the crash, Ren felt something unexpected. Gratitude. 3 days passed in the small cabin. Ren's wound healed much slower than it should have, but it was healing. The family had cleaned it and wrapped it with simple bandages. Their primitive medicine was surprisingly effective. Ben spent hours trying to communicate with Ren. The boy was smart, drawing pictures, and using simple gestures. By the third day, they had worked out basic words: food, water, sleep, pain. Ren learned that the humans lived far from others of their kind. Jack was what they called a ranger, someone who watched the forest. This isolation had been lucky for Ren. It meant no other humans knew about him yet. On the morning of the fourth day, Ben showed Ren something that made his heart race. The boy had been tinkering with Ren's broken scanner. He had opened it up, dried out the components, and somehow got it working again. Fixed, Ben said, one of the words Ren now understood. The boy handed the device back with pride in his eyes. Ren activated the scanner. The screen flickered to life, displaying data in the Valeri language. He quickly searched for signals from other survivors. The scanner picked up a faint transmission about 20 miles to the north. He showed Ben the screen and pointed north. "Others like me," he said in his own language, then made a gesture they had established for same. Ben's eyes widened. "More aliens? We should tell Dad." Jack was less enthusiastic about the news. "If there are more of them, the government will find out soon. Military will get involved." "But we have to help him find his people," Ben argued. As they talked, Ren noticed something on the scanner. The transmission had changed. It was now a distress call, but not just any distress call. It was a battle alert. Talia's signal. She was gathering forces. The Valeri had strict protocols for crash landings on primitive worlds: minimize contact, await rescue, and under no circumstances reveal advanced technology that could have set a planet's natural development. But Talia had always been aggressive, believing in Valeri's superiority above all else. A news report on the family's old television caught everyone's attention. A reporter stood in front of military vehicles. Behind her, smoke rose from a forested area. "The military has cordoned off this section of national forest after what they're calling an aircraft crash. Witnesses report seeing unusual lights in the sky 3 nights ago." The image changed to show a blurry photo of something that Ren recognized immediately: a Valeri escape pod. This image, captured by a hiker, has sparked online speculation about a possible UFO crash. Jack turned off the TV. "It's starting. They'll be looking everywhere now." Emma touched Ren's arm. "You're not safe here anymore. They'll search these woods soon." Ren nodded, understanding enough of their words. He picked up the scanner and showed them Talia's signal again. He needed to reach her before she did something dangerous. The sound of distant helicopters made them all tense. "They're coming this way," Jack said, looking out the window. "We need to hide him." "The old mine tunnels," Ben suggested. "They run for miles under the mountain. I can show him how to get to the other side." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Pack food and water. Flashlights. Map of the tunnels." As Emma and Ben gathered supplies, Jack approached Ren. The humans still didn't fully trust him, but there was respect in his eyes now. "Others like you," Jack said slowly, pointing to the scanner. "Good or bad?" Ren understood the question. He thought about Talia and her views on lesser species. He thought about the protocols she was likely breaking right now. "Some good," he replied, using one of the human words he had learned. He held up his hand with fingers slightly apart. "Some, not good." Jack nodded, seeming to understand. "Be careful then." An hour later, Ren and Ben slipped out the back door of the cabin. The sound of helicopters was closer now. Ben led the way into the forest, toward a rocky hill where the entrance to the old mines was hidden. Ren's scanner beeped softly, tracking Talia's signal. As they disappeared into the trees, Ren glanced back at the cabin. These humans had shown him kindness when they had every reason to fear him. They were helping him now, risking their own safety. The mighty Valeri had conquered hundreds of worlds with their superior technology and enhanced biology. But here, on this primitive planet, Ren was beginning to wonder if his people had missed something important, something these humans seemed to understand naturally. The mine tunnels were dark and narrow. Ben led the way with a flashlight, his young face serious as he checked the old map his father had given them. Ren followed, ducking his tall frame to avoid the low ceiling. These tunnels were dug 100 years ago, Ben explained, though he knew Ren couldn't understand most of his words. Dad says they go all the way through the mountain. Ren's scanner beeped more strongly now. They were getting closer to Talia's signal. He paused occasionally to check their direction, the blue glow from the device casting eerie shadows on the rock walls. After 2 hours of walking, Ben stopped to rest. He sat on a rock and offered Ren water from a bottle. As Ren drank, he noticed something strange. The water tasted different here, and his body was reacting to it differently than on the ship or at the cabin. His senses felt sharper, but his muscles ached in a new way. "You okay?" Ben asked, noticing Ren's discomfort. Before Ren could respond, a distant boom echoed through the tunnels. Both of them froze. "What was that?" Ben whispered. The scanner in Ren's hand flashed with new data. He recognized the energy signature immediately. Valari weapons. Talia was attacking something, or someone. Ren stood quickly and pointed ahead. They needed to hurry. The tunnel began to slope upward. Fresh air flowed toward them, suggesting they were nearing an exit. The scanner's beeping grew more urgent. Whatever Talia was doing, it was escalating. They emerged from the mine into a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. The afternoon sun blinded them momentarily after the darkness of the tunnels. When Ren's eyes adjusted, he saw smoke rising about a mile away. "Is that where your friends are?" Ben asked, pointing to the smoke. Ren nodded grimly. These were not friends in the human sense. Talia was his second in command, but her methods had always troubled him. Now, crashed on a primitive world, those methods could be disastrous. They moved through the forest as quickly as they could. As they got closer, Ren began to hear sounds of combat. The distinctive hum of Valari energy weapons and the sharp crack of human firearms. Finally, they reached the edge of another clearing. What Ren saw made his blood run cold. Talia had established a perimeter around several crashed escape pods. About 20 Valari survivors had created a makeshift camp, using salvage technology from their pods. They had constructed a basic shield generator and were now engaged in a firefight, with human military forces surrounding the area. Military vehicles formed a wide circle around the Valari position. Soldiers fired at the energy shield, their bullets dissolving harmlessly against it. Occasionally, a Valari would fire back with an energy weapon, forcing the humans to take cover. "Those are your people," Ben whispered, eyes wide at the scene. Ren spotted Talia directing the defense. She looked different. Her skin was paler than normal, and she moved with less grace than he remembered. Earth was affecting the Valari physiology more than he had realized. Several human soldiers lay motionless on the ground. Ren felt a surge of anger. This was not the Valari way. They conquered, yes, but unnecessary killing of primitives was forbidden under their codes. "Stay here," Ren told Ben, using one of the human phrases he had learned. He needed to stop this before it got worse. Ben grabbed his arm. "It's dangerous." Ren gently removed the boy's hand and nodded. "I know." He stepped out of the forest, hands raised, and called out in the Valari language. "Talia, stop this now." The fighting paused. All eyes turned to him. "Commander." Talia's voice wavered with surprise. "You survived." "Stand down," Ren ordered, continuing to walk forward. "This is not our way." "They attacked us first," Talia argued. "These primitives surrounded us with weapons." Ren noticed that several of the Valari looked ill. Some were coughing, others showed rashes on their skin. Earth's environment was taking a toll on them. "We cannot win here," Ren said, now speaking to all his people. "This planet is killing us slowly. Our technology is failing. Our bodies are weakening. So we should surrender to these creatures?" Talia asked incredulously. Ren shook his head. "Not surrender. Cooperate." He pointed to the ill Valari. "Look at them, Talia. Earth's bacteria, its gravity, its atmosphere. They're all working against us. As if to prove his point, one of the Valeri soldiers suddenly collapsed, convulsing. Others rushed to help, but didn't know what to do. Ren turned toward the human forces. He raised his hands higher and took another step forward. "I need to show them another way," he said, "before it's too late for all of us." Ren walked slowly between the two forces, his hands still raised. The human soldiers trained their weapons on him, fingers hovering over triggers. Behind him, his own people watched with a mixture of confusion and anger. "I am Commander Ren of the Valeri," he called out in his language, knowing the humans couldn't understand. Then he tried the few human words he had learned. "No fight. Talk." A human officer stepped forward cautiously. "Hold your fire," he ordered his troops. The man wore different markings than the other soldiers. He studied Ren with narrowed eyes. "You speak English." Ren shook his head. "Little," he managed, one of Ben's taught words. From the edge of the forest, Ben watched the scene unfold. The boy made a decision and darted out from his hiding place. "Wait," Ben shouted, running toward them. "I can help. He's trying to stop the fighting." Several soldiers turned their weapons toward the boy. "Hold fire," the officer shouted again. "He's just a kid." Ben reached Ren's side, breathing hard. "I can help you talk to them. I've been learning his words, and he knows some of ours." The officer looked skeptical, but nodded. "What's he trying to say?" Ben turned to Ren. Through a combination of simple words, gestures, and drawings in the dirt, they managed to communicate. Ben then faced the officer. "He says they're stranded here. Their ship crashed. They can't call for help. And," Ben hesitated, looking at Ren, "he says this planet is making them sick. They need help, not a fight." "And why should we help them?" the officer asked, eyeing the energy shield where Valeri soldiers had killed his men. Ben relayed the question to Ren as best he could. Ren considered his answer carefully. He pointed to the sick Valeri soldier, then to the sky, then made a cutting motion across his throat. "He says they'll die here without help," Ben translated. "Their bodies can't handle Earth. And I think he's saying they have knowledge that could help us." Behind the shield, Talia watched with growing anger. "Commander, what are you doing?" she called in their language. "These primitives cannot help us. We should take what we need by force." Ren turned to her. "Look at yourself, Talia. Look at all of you." The Valeri soldiers glanced at each other. Their skin had lost its healthy blue luster. Many were coughing or scratching at rashes. One had collapsed completely. "Earth's bacteria are attacking us," Ren continued. "Our enhanced immune systems can't adapt fast enough. Our technology is failing in this environment. We need their help to survive until rescue comes." "If rescue comes," someone muttered. "And what about our pride?" Talia demanded. "We are Valeri. We do not beg for help from lesser species." Ren's patience snapped. "Your pride will kill us all." He gestured to the fallen soldier. "Is that what you want? To die here, on this primitive world, because you were too proud to accept help?" A tense silence fell over the Valeri. Ren turned back to the humans. Through Ben's limited translation, he began to negotiate. The officer, who introduced himself as Colonel Davis, was understandably wary, but he was also practical. "What can you offer in exchange for our help?" Ren reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a portable medical scanner. He handed it to the colonel. "Medicine," Ben translated as Ren explained. "They know things about healing that we don't." The colonel examined the device. When he activated it, it displayed a complete scan of his body, highlighting a small growth in his lung that he didn't know about. "Early cancer," Ben translated Ren's words. "They can help." The colonel's expression changed. "Stand down," he ordered his troops. Then he spoke into his radio. "Get the medical team up here. And call Dr. Miller. Tell her we have some new patients." As the human medics approached cautiously, Ren turned to Talia. "Lower the shield." She hesitated, then complied. The energy field flickered and died. Ren nodded to Ben, silently thanking the boy for his help. Then he faced his people. Today we learned something new. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to set pride aside. The human medics began tending to the sick Valari, while scientists cautiously examined their technology. The two species, separated by light years of evolution and technology, found themselves working together for a common purpose: survival. For Ren, watching humans use their primitive but effective medicine to help his people, it was the beginning of a profound realization. Perhaps being untouchable wasn't about power at all. Perhaps it was about something these humans seemed to understand instinctively: adaptation. 6 months passed since the day Ren stepped between two worlds at war. The military base that once surrounded the Valari camp had transformed into a joint research facility. Humans and Valari worked side by side, each learning from the other. Dr. Miller, a human scientist with kind eyes and a brilliant mind, had become the bridge between the species. She had developed treatments for the illnesses plaguing the Valari, allowing them to adapt to Earth's environment. In return, the Valari shared medical knowledge that helped humans make breakthroughs in treating diseases that had once been incurable. Ren stood by a window in the main research building, watching Earth's sun set behind the mountains. The sight still amazed him. On his homeworld, sunsets lasted mere minutes. Here, the sky painted itself in colors for nearly an hour. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Miller joined him at the window. I've watched thousands of sunsets in my life, but I never truly appreciated them until I saw them through your eyes. Ren nodded. His command of the human language had improved greatly. We have nothing like this at home. Everything there is, controlled, predictable. Is that why your people conquered so many worlds, looking for something unpredictable? Ren considered this. Perhaps, or perhaps we simply believed that was what superior beings should do. Ben entered the room, now wearing a special badge that gave him access to the facility. The boy had become the unofficial ambassador between humans and Valari, his natural ability with languages making him invaluable. Ren, the communication array is ready for testing, Ben announced excitedly. For months, humans and Valari had worked together to build a device powerful enough to send a signal to Valari space. Today would be their first attempt to contact the homeworld. They walked together to the command center where Talia waited. She had changed in these months. The arrogance was gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet respect. Earth had humbled her in ways no enemy ever could. All systems are ready, Commander, she said. Ren nodded and turned to Colonel Davis, who now led the human side of the operation. Shall we proceed? The colonel gestured forward. It's your call, Commander. Ren activated the array. Energy hummed through the makeshift station, a blend of Valari technology and human ingenuity. The signal beamed toward the stars, carrying a message of their situation and coordinates. Now they could only wait. 3 days later, a response came. The High Council of the Valari had received their transmission. A rescue ship was being dispatched. It would arrive in approximately 1 Earth year. The news spread quickly through the compound. For most Valari, it was cause for celebration. They would return home. Ren felt strangely conflicted. That night, he sat with Ben's family around a campfire outside their cabin. Jack and Emma had been allowed to return home, though the area remained restricted to other civilians. So you'll be leaving us, Jack said, poking at the fire with a stick. Not for many months, Ren replied. Ben looked up at him. But you will leave. Ren saw the sadness in the boy's eyes. That was always the plan, to return to our world. And then what? Emma asked. Your people will keep conquering worlds. Ren looked into the fire. That is the question I have been considering. Our time here has shown me that there are different forms of strength, different ways of being. He thought about how humans had faced countless challenges throughout their history, diseases, wars, natural disasters, and had survived not through superior technology or biology, but through cooperation, creativity, and an incredible will to adapt. When I return, I will speak of what I learned here, Ren said finally. How a species we considered primitive showed us that true advancement isn't measured by conquest, but by how well we adapt, how we work together to overcome challenges. Jack nodded. And if they don't listen? Some will, Ren replied. Talia already has. Others will take time. He looked up at the night sky, where somewhere beyond the visible stars, his homeworld continued its path of conquest. But they must learn. Because someday the Valari will encounter a species that cannot be conquered. And if we haven't learned to adapt, to cooperate rather than dominate, you'll end up like you did here, Ben finished, stranded and humbled. Ren placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Exactly. We believed we were untouchable because of our power, but Earth taught us that true strength comes from something else entirely.